But we begin tonight with President Biden addressing inflation in an address on Tuesday, with the stock market making some wild moves recently and fears of a potential recession after the Federal Reserve raised interest rates a half percentage point last week. The president took the issue head on.
I want us to be crystal clear about the problem. There are two leading causes of inflation we're seeing today. The first cause of inflation is a once-in-a-century pandemic. Not only did it shut down our global economy, it threw the supply chains and demand completely out of whack, especially in countries where more effective recovery responses weren't available, especially in those sectors that rely on semiconductors. These supply challenges have been further hampered by the onset of Delta and Omicron viruses. And you've all seen it, you've all felt it. And this year we have a second cause, Mr. Putin's war in Ukraine.
So for more on today's top stories, let's bring in some of the smartest political journalists that I know, Nancy Cordes and Nikole Killion. Nancy is CBS News chief White House correspondent, and Nikole is CBS congressional correspondent. Thank you both for being here. Nancy, I want to start with you and the president today. He laid out the causes of inflation as he sees them, but what are his proposed solutions?
Well, a lot of the solutions that he talked about today, he's proposed or implemented in the past. There wasn't a lot new that he spoke about, and that's part of the challenge for the White House. Is the reality is that while inflation is on the minds of everyone, there's not that much that the White House itself can do about it. But the president is determined to talk about it a lot, make sure that Americans know that he is concerned. So, for example, he's tapped the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to try to bring down gas prices. He has proposed legislation that would bring down the cost of child care and would promote green energy. And so, what he's doing is sort of week after week, both at the White House and traveling around the country, making the argument, look, I've got a plan. I've been doing what I can. I understand that inflation is on the minds of voters. And today he took it a step further, really calling out his Republican opponents, or MAGA Republicans, as he put it, to argue, we are in campaign season after all, that the Republicans have a worse plan, and that if they were allowed to take control of the Senate, that inflation would be left unaddressed. And so this is sort of a preview of what you're going to hear from this president between now and November, as he tries to make the case to the American people that there are segments of the economy that are doing really well, and that he's working on the parts that aren't doing as well.
Yeah, Nikole, to that point, I mean, Republicans are very eager to run against the president on the economy and inflation. So what are they taking away from Biden's speech today?
Well, basically, it is to bash the president, as they have done for the better part of a year now, arguing that he has not done enough to address the issues of inflation. And, of course, Florida Senator Rick Scott, who the president took aim at quite extensively in his speech today, has said that he thinks President Biden should resign. And he also challenged him to a debate in Florida over the economy and, what the president could and should be doing to try to tackle these issues of inflation. But that is a message that we heard reiterated by Republican leaders today at their policy lunches, making the case that they feel that the president is simply incapable of dealing with inflation, and they feel this speech did him no favors.
Nikole, I want to talk a little bit about Rick Scott. I mean, he has emerged as a foil, really, for Democrats and especially the president. And that really escalated today. Actually, our colleague, Ed O'Keefe, asked him about this. Let's take a listen.
You called out Rick Scott a little while ago in your remarks. Earlier today, anticipating your remarks, he said, and I'm just quoting here, that the best thing, most effective thing Joe Biden can do to solve the inflation crisis he created is resign. He's the problem. The senator added later, Joe Biden is unwell, he's unfit for office, he's incoherent, incapacitated, and confused. These are his words. Offering you a chance to respond to that.
I think the man has a problem.
All right, Nancy. So can you give us a little bit of background here.
Sure.
I mean, why has Rick Scott, the senator from Florida, emerged as this potential person to really take aim at, as the president did?
I think the best way to think about it is you've got two politicians here who were doing some deflecting today. First, President Biden, who really struggles in the polls when it comes to the issue of inflation, deflecting to the Republicans. And specifically, as you pointed out, he talked a lot about Rick Scott's plan. This is a plan that Scott released back in February that was so controversial among Republicans that you had Republican leaders like Mitch McConnell distancing themselves from it, which was kind of weird because Rick Scott is the chair this year of the Republican Senate Campaign Committee. He is working to get Republicans elected to the Senate, so usually you would think that he would be in lockstep with Republican leadership. But what he was proposing, for instance, was that everybody in America should pay some income tax. Well, the problem is right now about half of Americans don't pay any income tax because they don't make enough money. And so that looked a lot to Republicans and Democrats alike like a tax hike on the lowest income Americans, on half the country. He also proposed perhaps allowing Medicare and Social Security to sunset. I mean, two incredibly popular programs. So, of course, it wasn't surprising the president decided to take aim at that plan coming from Rick Scott today. Rick Scott knew that was going to happen. And so what does he do? He puts out this statement that really is kind of over the top, but echoes what we've heard in the conservative blogosphere over the past couple of years, that President Biden is declining, that he's confused, incoherent. But, Senator Scott really took it to another level, trying to pre-butt what he knew would be a big attack on him. And it was really surprising to see a sitting senator say things like that about the president of the United States. And it certainly appeared that when our Ed O'Keefe wandered into all of that, the president kind of relished the opportunity to take it on directly.
Yeah, I've talked to a lot of Democrats who view Rick Scott's proposal as kind of an in-kind donation to their efforts to keep the Senate, and Republicans have not been happy about Rick Scott's proposal. But I want to switch gears a little bit to another topic that's going to be really big on Capitol Hill this week, which is abortion. Nikole, you sat down with Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, who's from New York, to talk about this issue. What did she tell you?
Well, she told me what many Democrats have been saying, and that is that they are going to continue to fight for this issue. They do think that the vote tomorrow matters, even if it ultimately fails and they don't have the 60 votes to pass it. Senator Gillibrand said that it's really important to at least allow senators to show where they stand on this issue, that this is a moment in history, really, and that is a message that we also heard echoed today from a leader, Chuck Schumer, who said that this will be an opportunity to get senators on record and that they will chart a path forward after this vote, although he didn't specify. What many Democrats, including the senator, told me is that, they ultimately believe that this will be a referendum come November, and they do think that this is something that could potentially galvanize voters to really decide which side are you on. Are you for women's reproductive rights or against? And what type of future do you want for this country if the Supreme Court ultimately overturned Roe versus Wade? What's interesting about that is we have some new polling from CBS News that shows that it may not necessarily be a galvanizing issue, in the sense that about 2/3 of those that we surveyed essentially said that it doesn't necessarily make them more motivated to vote, at least not in this particular moment. But this will be an important issue to watch going forward.
Yeah, Nikole, another interesting dynamic to watch on Capitol Hill has been the way that Republicans have been handling this. You would think that they would be cheering this decision, but they've been kind of muted in their praise of the decision, kind of waiting till the final decision comes out, and also, concerned about the politics, certainly. But you got a chance to ask Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, who very much wants to be Majority Leader, about abortion this afternoon. What did he have to tell you?
So, basically he was asked whether or not he would move forward with some type of national abortion ban. He was kind of asked that question in various ways in light of an interview that he gave last week to USA Today, where he said that a national abortion ban is possible. And I did ask the minority leader about that. I believe we have that clip, so let's take a listen. In that interview, I mean, what did you mean by saying a national abortion ban is possible? And there is some legislation potentially under consideration by some of your members to ban abortion at 6 weeks. Do you plan to move forward with that?
The word possible refers to the Supreme Court's decision. If, in fact, that becomes the decision, makes it possible. The best evidence of that is that the Democratic leader is going to have us vote on it tomorrow. The Senate, by the way, is democratically chosen by the people of the country, and that's the point. The court makes it, if that's the decision, the court makes it possible for there to be votes at all levels of government and democratic bodies on this issue.
So again, he kind of clarified that, you know, basically once this decision comes down from the Supreme Court, if it, you know, Roe is ultimately overturned, then at that point he thinks that it is possible that this could be an issue that is decided on various levels of government, although when asked repeatedly by reporters today, again, he would not specify if Senate Republicans specifically would move forward with some type of national abortion ban. We do know that there are some members of the Republican conference who have been discussing potential proposals, including, as I mentioned in that question, a potential ban at 6 weeks. So again, that is something that we will be watching going forward to see, again, once the Supreme Court rules, if Republicans do take some type of a legislative action in response.
And Nancy, the administration is talking about some of the economic fallout from this potential decision. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen this morning testified before the Senate Banking, Housing and Urban Affairs Committee, and abortion came up as an economic issue and topic. Let's take a listen.
Well, I believe that eliminating the right of women to make decisions about when and whether to have children would have very damaging effects on the economy and would set women back decades.
So, Nancy, it does seem a little bit unusual for someone in Yellen's position to, make this connection between abortion and the economy. But can you kind of walk us through what she was talking about here? Because I do think it's a really important issue to highlight.
Sure. I mean, there actually is a lot of research over the years, ever since Roe versus Wade in the 1970s, that indicates that when women have more control over their reproductive health, when they are able to get an abortion if they need one, then they have more access to schooling, more access to the workforce. You can envision that because a lot of women who do end up having abortions are young women, they end up the women who don't get those abortions perhaps have an unwanted pregnancy, end up having to drop out of school or drop out of the workforce at a very young age, and that can set them back. There's even some research that shows that women who don't have access to abortions end up staying in poverty longer. And so that's what she was pointing to specifically today, and even more recently. This is sort of analogous. If you look at the pandemic and how many mothers ended up dropping out of the workforce because they had to stay home and care for their kids because their kids were suddenly learning from home, and that has had a demonstrable drag on the economy, and that's something that concerned policymakers a lot. And so what the secretary was saying today is that if women lose the ability to control their reproductive health in that way, that it could cause some similar problems.
All right, Nancy Cordes and Nikole Killion, thank you for your reporting and spending some time with us today. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
You bet.